Thank you to everyone who tuned into our live streams on Facebook and YouTube. We will get started in about 30 seconds. Thank you to everyone on the live stream who has joined this at the virtual table event with Laura Washington and Lynn Sweet. Here is Laura Washington.
Good evening and welcome back to At the Virtual Table. This is just a small sample of the great digital offerings that we have at the Sun-Times, that we bring it to you wherever you are. You can get the Sun-Times e-paper, which is a daily digital replica of the print product, which always lives, as you can see on the screen, at paper.suntimes.com. And we have a special digital offer that is limited only to this show, in which you get unlimited access to the e-paper and every story on the suntimes.com for only $2.49 a month. Learn more and subscribe at suntimes.com. Subscribe. You've got to stay informed with our essential political coverage, the latest on the coronavirus, and much, much more. You can do that by subscribing to our podcast at the URLs on your screen. Now, Chicago schools are at a major crossroads. The schools are emerging from a global pandemic with hopes that the children will be back in school in September. The top leadership at the Chicago Public Schools is departing. In Springfield, legislators are grappling with legislation that may establish an elected school board for Chicago. And the teachers union, the Chicago Teachers Union, is growing in power and reach. We're going to dissect all of this and what it means for the future of education in Chicago and Illinois with a stellar lineup that will help us navigate it all. Sybil Madison, the top education advisor to Mayor Lori Lightfoot, Stacy Davis-Gates, the vice president of the Chicago Teachers Union, and our own Nader Issa, the education reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times. And now I'd like to introduce our co-host, Chicago Sun-Times Washington Bureau Chief, Lynn Sweet. Take it away.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you everybody for joining us. You know, At the Virtual Table is 1 year old this month, and so we have come a long way. Big show tonight. The Chicago Teachers Union, as Laura Washington has said, is one of the most influential political forces in the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois. Stacy Davis-Gates is the vice president of the CTU. She's also the executive vice president of the Illinois Federation of Teachers, but it's the job she had before it that tells so much about what we're going to be talking about in the politics of the CTU. She served as the union's political and legislative director, and she's also the chair of another political group that may come into play as we talk about an elected school board called United Working Families. Stacy attended St. Mary's College, the University of Notre Dame, and Concordia, lives on the South Side. Anyway, welcome. Question 1, Stacy, elected school board Springfield, you're the political genius. Do you have the votes to pass it? The session ends in a month.
Well, we certainly believe that we have the votes to pass it. We are encouraged by the widespread support here in the city of Chicago. As you know, over 90% of the Chicagoans have voted for a non-binding referendum for an elected school board in this city. We are the only school district in the entire state that doesn't have one. We see this as an issue of equity and voting access. And we believe we should have one. And many of the residents of the city believe that as well.
Okay, but do you have what's the margin? Can you give me numbers? You're a vote counter. I know it by looking at it. That is how you operate in Springfield. A veto-proof margin in the House and the Senate, or what?
Look, we have had very substantive discussions with a range of people on both sides of the aisle who believe in local control and who believe in democracy. So we feel pretty confident that we will get an opportunity to see that happen in the Senate. As you know, it's already passed several times on the House side, and we're just looking to have the bill landed on the governor's desk for his signature.
And we expect him to sign it. Okay, so you have, just looked it up before we went on the show. You have 2 PACs that the CTU operates. Most of your play was in state races. You you gave some money in Kim Fox's race and a Supreme Court case, but your play is Springfield. You have about 700,000 as of March 31. If you get this 21-member board, Stacy, are you going to run candidates then? And will the CTU seek to control most of this board?
Well, I often think that these headlines are wrong. What you need to know about the work we're doing in Springfield is that we're doing it in coalition. In fact, our union has been late to the party. This issue of an elected school board has been one that we joined into coalition with. And so we take our leadership, quite frankly, from parents, from community members and organizations.
I guess I am cutting you off, but bear with me. I stipulate, however we got there, we're parked at the intersection. This might become law, even though Lori Lightfoot doesn't want it. We could get to that. We're a political show. I ask the political questions. Are you gonna run candidates? We know that you can. We know you have 700,000. You could raise more. I looked, you're really good at getting the small money in. Shouldn't be a hard question. What's your plan?
Well, it's not a hard question, but I do want to contextualize it, Lynn. We are an organization of small donors. We represent over 30,000 retired and active members of the Chicago Teachers Union. That is a far cry from the $26 million check that people like Ken Griffin, who believe that 150 of our schools should have.
Hold on, we're going to get to that in a moment.
Understood. I just want to make it plain.
We'll run plates. We'll get there.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to make it plain, though, that our interests are the interests of residents of Chicago. As you know, our members have to live in the city of Chicago. We send our children to the Chicago public schools. All three of my children attend the Chicago public schools. Absolutely, we have a stake in the health and the wellness of our school district.
And by the way, I am a proud graduate of the Chicago public schools. I went to Peterson Elementary School, Christiana, 400 Christiana, 5510 Christiana, the Von Steuben Upper Grade Center, and Von Steuben High School. Am I the only graduate of Chicago Public Schools on this show tonight of all my schooling? Anyway, so I want to get to a bottom line. I'm stipulating everything you're saying, and you're foreshadowing that, of course, we expect that if there's an elected school board, the charter school money, the conservative money will run their candidates. So don't make this so hard for me, please.
I'm not making it hard. Not making it hard, Lynn. I just want to be clear and to contextualize it. People talk about our power. What we talk about is our participation in democracy. And so absolutely our union is going to continue to participate in democracy.
Okay, so if you had to write the story, would you write it, Stacy, that yes, based on what you said, CTU plans to run candidates if we have an elected school board?
CTU plans to support strong public schools in the city of Chicago in any imaginable way possible.
Okay.
So can I jump in and ask you now? You're fully behind the concept of an elected school board. There's some debate, and of course, as Lynn points out, the mayor would like something a little different. She'd like a hybrid school board, whether it be part elected, part appointed, particularly by her, because she believes that she needs to be able to have a hand in this. Are you open to compromise? Are you open to something in the middle, a hybrid as opposed to fully elected? And if so, Laura, if not, why not?
Well, Laura, I don't know how you compromise democracy. It's either democracy or it isn't.
And you don't, well, we have a democratic system where we elect public officials to represent us. That's part of our democracy. We've elected Lori Lightfoot to represent us and to run the school system. So why is it that she cannot have a role in that democratic process along with elected citizens and parents who serve on that board?
Well, because that's not what we do in America. In America, we go to the polls and we elect people to represent our interests. And every single school district in this state, parents, community people have an opportunity to go to the polls and get people who represent their interests to push forward the policies on the school board. We want that opportunity in Chicago. And in a school district that is 90% families of color, we believe that this is also a voting rights issue. This wouldn't be acceptable, we believe, in other parts of the state, and it shouldn't be acceptable here in Chicago either. Again, it's either democracy or it isn't.
But part of the challenge in a democracy is that there's a challenge of money. And as Lynn points out, you've done a very good job of husbanding your resources. You have the money, you have hundreds of thousands of dollars to run candidates. There are other people represented in the community who maybe don't have those resources. So are you going to have an advantage over, if you do back candidates, or your candidate's going to have a big advantage simply because you've got the cash that other segments of the community don't have?
Absolutely not, because one of the things that was not mentioned just a moment ago is the fact that Stand for Children, which is funded by billionaires like Ken Griffin, they are actually on a campaign right now, a 6-figure mailing campaign to push back against an elected school board. In fact, when we look at their money and we look at our money, we know that we're going to have to be on doors and that we're going to have to do it the grassroots way. They have benefactors who can write $26 million checks to kill fair tax here in Illinois.
And we know that actually the Walton family of Walmart fame has been very active in Illinois politics in funding groups, the charter school groups. Slight change of subject, and we'll get back to an elected school board, but there's another bill pending that I am not sure its fate, to unionize principals, and it wouldn't be within the CTU. What's your, and I think it's in a pretty good position right now. What's your lobby play on that one? Are you trying to move it or bury it?
We believe that workers need a voice. I mean, that is quintessentially a part of, one of our missions in the city. And so more power to them. So
how, and if they're in a different union, how would that play out? They wouldn't quite be management then, or what? How would you see it?
Well, they're not quite management now. In Chicago, we're under mayoral control, and the mayor has the first, the middle, and the final say. That being said, they have a system like this in New York City. And from what I read, principals played a pretty productive role in how safety was defined for New York public city schools during this COVID crisis.
On it. So are you trying to what's your take on why Jackson left and stepped down? Because she seemed to say she was just exhausted from dealing with the CTU.
Well, what she said, one of the things she said specifically was she was tired of the ugly politics that was involved around negotiations. And the implication was that there was a lot of tension and challenges with working with the union. So is that true? And are there things you could do going forward to make sure that there's a more collegial, if not harmonious, relationship with the next CPS CEO?
Well, I'll say a couple of things about that. Thing one is that public education for melanated people in this country has always been a political issue. People like me, we couldn't learn. Our literacy was literally outlawed. So to say that education should not be political, well, it's a part of the fabric of this country that education is a political thing. And so we have to, respect history, right?
But does it have to be ugly? What she says is it gets ugly and it gets contentious, and that's not productive.
Laura, it is ugly when Black people are, barred from actually learning, right? The law of the land said that people like you and I could not learn. I think part two, and what is not often spoken about, is that COVID-19 has taken a toll on the average person. And it has been exceptionally hard for leaders. We lost Karen Lewis during COVID-19. All three of my children have been learning at home during COVID-19. I have family members who have pre-existing health issues. I have had family members in the hospital with the COVID diagnosis. So it has not been easy trying to figure out how to both live, survive, manage your family life, and also lead large institutions. So I would say hats off to all of us who have been able to persevere and survive these moments.
But moving forward, we're going to have a new CEO chief coming in, hopefully by the fall. What is your thinking about how to advance that relationship as you move forward and reopen the schools in the fall?
Well, I don't think that it's just about the new CEO. I actually think it's about the moment we're in. To borrow a line from our president, this is a time to recover and reimagine our institutions. The federal government has sent about $2 billion here to Chicago in an effort to help us recover. We are fully in the space of collaboration and figuring out how we do this well together. As you all know, almost 80% of our families did not return to the school buildings. And that means that we're going to have to work very hard in these intervening months to make sure that families are reengaged, that they have what they need to feel safe, and that we begin the year on the good foot. Even more so, I would say, is that we're going to have a particular eye for equity. As you know, if you look at the map of Chicago, the number of people who have gotten vaccines in the city versus the number of people who have been infected with COVID, there is an imbalance there. And that imbalance is going to be visible on our school communities, which is why it was very important for us to figure out how we get vaccines available to the students who can take them and to their family members as well. It is important that we understand this moment and that we pull in the same direction. So we are ready to reimagine how we do school in Chicago. Our buildings are going to need ventilation upgrades. We have older buildings. We're going to have to figure out how to put more resources and co-curricular programming in the city. Think about it. Candace Parker is coming back to the city of Chicago to play professional basketball. All of the little girls who will be inspired by her example, how many of those schools that they attend have programs right now for girls basketball? Very few of them do. And so what we have to do is to reimagine a school district that meets the needs of all of its students at the same time, and to invest the money that we have from the federal government to jumpstart this reimagination.
And we have just a few short months to do that. September is just around the corner. Is that going to be possible, especially with the fact that we don't even have we don't have any leadership at the top of CPS? Are you talking to folks at CPS about this? Is there a strategy? Is there a plan that you're working on with them?
Well, I think it's two things. Thing one is that every summer our union runs an organizing institute that invites in community organizers, that invites in student organizers, along with our members. We're going to spend a lot of time talking to our families this summer. We're going to spend a lot of time knocking doors this summer and making phone calls. We're going to engage. In fact, the conversations and collaborations that we want to see will be ones that the families we serve want to see as well. Many of the things that we fought for back in February that landed were things that families told us that they needed to see, were things that our students provided. Again, we live in a city where over 100 of our young people have been shot, and 16 of them are dead. We're not only going to just need the doors to reopen to our school system, we're going to need social workers, we're going to need counselors, we're going to need nurses, and we're going to need a strong emphasis on curriculum that seeks to ameliorate the PTSD that many of them will come into the building with, and the other traumas associated with COVID and loss. This is not going to be a small endeavor. We're looking for partnership. We're looking for collaboration. And partnership has to come from every single stakeholder. That's a muscle that our current mayor and mayors of the past haven't been able to build. We stand ready to help them build that muscle. We stand ready to work with all stakeholders to make this happen. We need recovery.
Now, let me then, you're kind of underplay your very strong political role and influence here when you talk about partners, because you are a partner above partners on this. But you brought up the mayor. She's marking her 2-year anniversary today. And, you know, it's so interesting to see Democrats who are both left of center, both progressive, that you are having the problems that you have in forging relationship, the things you ticked off, Lightfoot's not, no one's against a lot of what you talked about, if not everything. So political question, are you looking around for a candidate to start looking at to run against her in 2 years?
I think that's a great question, Lynn, but as Laura just mentioned, we have a long way to go in a short time to get there. And our focus in this moment, especially for our members who are fatigued, especially for our members who have done a yeoman's job offering mutual aid, making sure that they are available to the families that they serve 24/7. They're looking to get back into school communities that are safe and well resourced.
Right. I know that, but you are so capable of doing many things at one time. You're also the political maven for the union. So it's part of what I would think your mission is. You're on top of the lobbying, you're on top of the legislative agenda, you're a big money raiser, is that you're thinking about this. So this is a long shot, but maybe you'll you're a player on this. Since you are so involved in what happens in Springfield impacts the union, are you involved in any way in any of the remap effort going on in Springfield right now for the State House and the State Senate?
Well, that's not traditionally a role we play. We, absolutely.
It's not a traditional union because you have a very broad agenda. So,
well, and fair enough. We do have a broad agenda. We do believe that the unhoused families in our city deserve housing, which is why we are a huge supporter of Delia Ramirez and what she's doing in Springfield. But to your point, we want to see the lives of real people in the city, especially the ones that attend the Chicago public schools, impacted in a positive way. Look, 20,000 of our students are unhoused. Their families are literally unhoused. So if there are candidates who are willing to fight the good fight to make sure that they get housing, we are supportive of that.
I'm getting before that. I'm just talking about the remap, because the remap will influence who may be candidates and the makeup of the legislature. And since you know politics, you know that the remap is crucial to figuring out the policy and programs you want to get supported. So are you keeping an eye on it? Are you involved? Are you in conversations with the leadership who are making the maps now, coming up against a deadline in just a few weeks?
Well, what I will say about the remap is that we are very concerned, and we want to make sure that representation lives in the map for Chicago. As you know, our city is as diverse as they come, and we believe that our representation should also mirror that. I would say that the Illinois House, the Illinois Senate, is one of the most diverse state houses in the country. We would want to maintain that. There are women who are in leadership. There are women who are represented there. I think that we have a pretty good space to start from. And if we can build on that, I think we would be in a good place here in Illinois.
Okay, so are you working with the Democratic leaders to do that building?
We're just supportive of the efforts to maintain diversity, gender, and race.
Okay, I tried. But I do want our listeners to know that we have been we're grateful that you've been here, Stacy Davis Gates, because we were talking to one of the most politically influential leaders of one of the most politically influential unions
who is frequently talked about as a possible mayoral candidate. She's sort of, I think, the top name that's out there is a mayoral candidate to run against Lori Lightfoot in 2 years. What would you want to say about that, Stacy? Is that something that you would rule out?
Listen, I think that is like humbling to hear you say that. I am at my core a high school history teacher and a mother of 3 children in the city. The work that I do is to be transformative so far in the public education space. I appreciate the honor of even being named in that rarefied space. But right now, and as far as I can tell, my efforts are going to be about making sure that my kids finish out the year strongly, and also make sure that our members and all stakeholders, especially our students, go back into school communities that are safe and well-resourced.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And now we're going to get a City Hall perspective. So Laura, take it away.
Sure. Thank you very much, Stacy. Come back anytime. When you're ready to announce that run, we want to hear from you. Thank you, Sybil Madison, for joining us tonight. Sybil Madison is the top advisor to Mayor Lori Lightfoot around education and human services issues. She's been in that role since July of 2019. She brings a 20-year plus career in education. It includes serving as a research associate and lecturer at Northwestern University's School of Education and Social Policy. She's also directed the Chicago City of Learning, which is a citywide effort to address the opportunity gap among Chicago's youth. Welcome, Sybil Madison.
Thank you for having me.
You certainly have the chops and the experience to delve into some of the issues we've just been discussing with Stacy. And I want to start with the conversation we just had with her around building support to open the schools in the fall, dealing with the COVID crisis, dealing with all the violence in the city. And there's a lot of work to do out there. She seems to be saying that she's willing to work with the mayor, which is encouraging to see, because there's been a lot of tensions between the mayor, CTU, and CPS. As we alluded to earlier, a lot of ugly politics is what Janice Jackson calls it. So what's the work that you are doing at City Hall now to build those bridges with the CTU, to work together to make sure that schools open and are open fully and in good health in the fall?
Yeah, first I want to say very happy to collaborate. CPS and CDPH, our public health department, and CTU are collaborating right now to get students and their families vaccinated. And I know that President Sharkey just said the other day that he's looking forward to working together to come up with a plan for a safe return 5 days a week to school in the fall. So of course we welcome that collaboration and partnership, and want to keep students at the center and know how important it is, to not only support their social emotional needs, but also to get them back into school so we can understand what their learning needs are as well.
Are you meeting with you or your staff meeting with the CTU on a regular basis on this issue to do this plan?
The CPS team meets with CTU. So I'm not directly involved in those conversations, but I know that there are ongoing conversations happening.
So, well, there's a lot of work to do around the relationship between the mayor and the CTU, and in fact, it appears, or at least if you follow what you see in the media, that the challenges are driven by some of the tensions between the mayor and the CTU. So what the CTU is not going anywhere. It's going to be there in the fall, and as we explained earlier, it may be even more powerful based on what happens in Springfield at the end of this month. So what are you doing to build on that relationship, to repair that relationship?
Sure. I mean, I think we're both working on it. I will say that working on an agreement to get our high school students back into school buildings went much better, and hopefully we can continue that rhythm of coming to the table, putting the interests on the table, and really working around those interests and getting to a place of agreement without the instability that I know families do not want to experience as they, give their kids over to a district. It's been, I think, a challenging 2 years for families, to be honest, and we know that our families really want stability, and they want to know what's going to happen. They want to be able to rely upon a date if there's a date to be open. They want to know what's going to happen next. They want to know that as soon as and as early as possible too. So again, we look forward to collaborating, to moving forward in the same direction, and giving our families the clarity and stability and assurance that they need to prepare for next school year. But
now that you're in the same rowboat
over time.
For the moment, though, I think the rowboat is going to have some choppy water, because you must know that it seems to me you do not have the votes in Springfield to stop the elected school board bill. Mayor Lightfoot this afternoon at her press conference talked about how she supports a hybrid, and she said this is one of the most consequential changes that you could have, and she's very concerned about making sure that undocumented people can vote. But I don't see what your Springfield play is now and how you could stop an elected board. Tell me where the votes are in the House and Senate that you have lined up to stop the elected board measures from being passed and signed into law, because Governor Pritzker supports an elected school board. Mayor Lightfoot, as we know, once did, doesn't now, wants the hybrid. What's the strategy here?
Well, then, we're working towards a compromise. We are working.
What have you got? They have the votes. I don't see where your leverage is. Why would, if they have enough votes for a elected school board, and they know the governor's going to sign the bill, what's your leverage for compromise?
Well, we're raising the issues that are most important to us. We're concerned, as you mentioned, the mayor is deeply concerned, especially as the #1 welcoming city in the country, right. Very concerned that non-citizens would not have representation. We're concerned about parents having representation. In many of the fully elected boards in the country, parents are not sufficiently represented on the board. We're concerned about diversity. So we looked at fully elected boards across the country in LA, even close by in Elgin. Those boards do not reflect the diversity.
Well, there's no way you can guarantee if it's an election, you could end up with a white male board if that's what the people choose. By the way, how would this, is the CPS really, in your view, going to now get in the business of running elections, if the mayor's vision were to gain political support, where is the expertise in the CPS to run school board elections? Because I think that's what the measure calls for.
Yeah, well, CPS is standing on a long history of local governance with our local school council structure, and CPS runs elections for local school councils. And we believe that at this moment, when governance is being opened up, and that we should leverage that history and the strength.
So you think you have the expertise to get this done? By the way, if I'm an undocumented person, what would I need to do to be able to vote? You know, Chicago, sanctuary city, I can't imagine you're going to demand voter IDs in the way that Republicans have been. Could you just briefly tell us how it would work?
Sure. Well, the board doesn't allow for non-citizens to vote right now, but as I said, CPS runs elections, LSC elections every 2 years, has a lot of experience in doing that, and non-citizens are enabled to come into their school and vote. So this is a practice that has been in existence for a long time that we would build on.
I have another question from an audience member related to that. Freud Jimenez says that it's been suggested that there should be a requirement for an elected school board position, that there should be a requirement that you should have experience as an LSC member, either as a parent, teacher, or community member. Where does the mayor stand on that, and what are your thoughts about that requirement?
Yeah, we like that idea. Again, we think that we should leverage. We have been electing representatives to help make decisions, important decisions about their schools, about their budgets, about curriculum, about leadership. And we do believe that we should leverage that system that we have in place, the LSCs, where people have not only put skin in the game, but have gained really good experience being involved in that process. It's hard to imagine that we would, we understand that people are not happy with the status quo. We understand why. We know that parents in particular have felt that they haven't had a voice or a seat at the table. And we believe that it would make the most sense to leverage that LSC structure to open up that opportunity.
But you believe that you feel that should be a requirement, that folks need to have LSC experience before they can be qualified to sit on the elected school board?
It has been part of our proposal. And like I said, we're in, there are lots of conversations happening down in Springfield.
Are you the quarterback? Who is the City Hall quarterback in Springfield on this school board elected issue? Is it you? Who's in charge of that?
Our deputy mayor for intergovernmental affairs is down in Springfield as we speak, unless he's driving back for the weekend.
Okay,
that's Manny Perez.
Right. Okay, so that's
down there. I drove down last week, and we'll go down again if I need to.
So let's shift here, if we could, and talk about
going to Springfield, just to tie a bow on this. Is that a useful trip for her?
I certainly will drive down to Springfield to be part of the conversation.
What about
if necessary?
What was the question, Lynn?
Is Mayor Lightfoot, would it change some votes if she went to Springfield to prevent the elected school board bill from passing?
I'm not sure, but the mayor does not step back from any issue. So
we'll see. Okay.
We'll see.
So there's a possibility that she may be going to Springfield before the end of the session to lobby.
I don't know if she'll need to, but this is an issue that's important to us, especially the non-citizen issue. So I'm not going to say that what she will or won't do. It's an important issue, and we're going to be present if we need to be present, especially.
Just one more question on this. She's been criticized for basically flipping on her commitment for an elected school board. When she campaigned, she was campaigned forward. She was asked about this at the press conference today, and the point was made that many people voted for her because of her support of a fully elected school board. Now she's looking at a hybrid board. What happened, and isn't this a broken promise on her part?
I would say there's a lot that you learn when you get into office and you actually play a role in governance. I'll also add, the Chicago Public School District is unlike any other in the state. If it were a company, it would be a Fortune 500 company. We're talking about a huge budget here. We're the only we're the only city in the state that actually puts money towards the pension.
Yeah.
Yes, and their taxpayers' dollars are at stake here. We've been parents to parentation. They want a seat at the table. Want to hold a mayor accountable. When you talk about 22 people being on a board and trying to pin down accountability, I think that's a concern. And by the way, I don't think there's any other fully elected board that is 22 strong. So again, we think that stability is important. We think representation is key. We think inclusion is absolutely necessary, and we think that accountability is important as well.
So I'd like to shift over to the leadership at CPS. As we've discussed, there's a vacancy at the top, and actually a couple of high-level positions are open. There's the mayor's planning a national search. Can you update us on where the search stands, and do you expect to have a new CPS CEO in place by the time schools open in September?
Yeah, so we've hired a search firm, as you indicated. They're hard at work, and there have been a lot of inquiries, as far as I understand. So the search is on.
What is
We
the
will be
name of the
launched.
search firm?
It's BWP. It's a local firm that has been involved in placing many superintendents, very familiar with Chicago Public School District.
Who are the principals?
So we're very happy with the firm. The firm will be having a series of interviews and focus groups to get information from stakeholders on what they believe the leadership profile should look like.
So focus groups, tell us about this.
Well, we want to create opportunities for people to let us know what's important to them at this moment in time. As Stacy mentioned, this is after coming through, and we're not even through it, through COVID, it's really an inflection point. We're in a totally different place. It's a whole new world. And we want to hear what people are saying they think the needs are in the district and the kind of leader that we need. We will be launching a survey as well to better understand, especially from parents, staff, teachers, the entire school community, administrators, what they think are the strengths and the challenges of the district, and what we need to see in the next leader.
So this is so interesting because usually it's, search firms may not use in a sense these political tools, marketing tools, survey research on it. I want to follow up though, what on the timing, Sybil, what are you planning on having this process done by the fall? And also, what are you looking for? What are the qualities you're looking for in a new CEO?
Yeah, well, of course, some of the qualities that I'm most interested in were reflected in our current leader, Dr. Janice Jackson. A strong sense of integrity, a commitment to equity. As Stacy mentioned, this is a moment to reimagine education. It's a moment to closing the gaps in achievement. We will better understand, actually see all of our students understand what their social, emotional, and academic needs are. We need a leader who's, ready for that moment and ready to embrace those students and their families when they return. We're really interested in thinking about how we can leverage some of the things that have been gained during this year. We have many more students with devices and there are opportunities for innovation. So we're just looking for a strong, consistent, very communicative leader who can kind of take us through this next phase. In terms of timing, this is an interesting time to be looking for a new leader. We definitely are working as fast as we can. Would love to be able to have an idea of who the next leader will be, in July, and then we have to figure out when someone would be able to join us.
So do you
given the time?
So you actually think you'll have a decision and announcement before September?
Yes.
what are when you talk about achievement, can you give us some insight into the mayor's thinking? What is the metric? Is it math scores, reading scores, college entrance rates, graduation rate? What Rahm Emanuel had all kinds of data points that he would cite as his metrics to mark his performance. What is the yardstick or yardsticks that you look at?
Yes, well, certainly there are a number of benchmarks over the course of a student's time in school. We are very interested in literacy and math, especially by third grade. We know that you really need to learn how to read by third grade, because after third grade, you're reading to learn. And so ensuring that our students are fully literate and on grade level with math as well by third grade is really important to us. We really want to focus on the inequities in course offerings. So we also know that it's another benchmark to be able to take out by 8th grade. So that's something that we would like to work on across the district. Of course, we always look at graduation, and our graduation rates are at an all-time high at 82.5%, pre-pandemic, and we want to continue to strengthen that. The mayor in particular is interested in work-based learning experiences that students can have during high school as they think about their post-secondary paths, and making sure that we can guarantee that whatever a path a student takes, it's a path that will lead to a viable future. So if they go directly into college, if they go into our city college system, which is really a hidden jewel in the city, and earn a certificate or go into a 2+2, or if they go right into work, we want to make sure that that pathway is a viable, sustaining pathway.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And you have a big few weeks ahead in Springfield, because it seems no one disagrees with anything you said. And in some ways with what Stacy said, it is just interesting, Laura and Madam Deputy Mayor, that people with so much in common can be so far apart. But the showdown is coming on Springfield, so we'll stay tuned for that. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us on the show. We're going to go.
Thank you for having me.
Now we're going to dissect everything that we learned from the union and from City Hall with our expert, subject matter expert. Let's bring in Nader, Issa, who is the education reporter for the Chicago Sun-Times. He knows everything, and he's been listening here. Thank you for joining.
I wouldn't say everything.
A lot, a whole lot.
So you heard us talk about the elected school board. What's your takeaway on where you think stand on it? What did you hear from our newsmaker guests that might have moved the ball some?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of pieces to this, right? One is the size of the board, how many members there are going to be on the board. Two is who gets to vote. There's this issue of undocumented immigrants or non-citizens getting to vote. There is also just where to hold them. If these are part of the regular municipal elections on the ballot, which obviously non-citizens wouldn't be able to, or like the deputy mayor was saying with the local school elections in the school buildings, there's a range of issues that are going to need to be sorted out. An obvious one is hybrid or fully elected. The mayor wants still a majority of the seats to be appointed by her and a minority to be elected. So I think what's going to happen moving forward is there's going to be negotiation between all stakeholders. The final bill is going to look a little different than what we're seeing in Springfield right now. But it'll be interesting to see where this thing lands. I think on a couple of these deals, like non-citizens voting, I mean, the proponents of a fully elected board, you're talking about ultra progressive people who want more democracy in Chicago. I don't think anyone over there is going to be saying we don't want non-citizens to be able to vote. And so it's going to be about hammering this out.
But Nader, you're going to see a lot of money from, voting is a big national issue now. And again, the progressives in Chicago, the mayor of the CTU, no problem with having undocumented people vote. And maybe that a local school council election didn't catch anyone's attention in the way citywide campaigns with undocumented people being allowed to vote. Well, I think you're going to open up a whole new chapter in a whole new political fight, because you will have outside money come in. And this is just a ripe issue, low-hanging fruit for people who want to run their own slates. You know, they may be front for the charter school forces, or just, you know, just people who don't believe in what, excuse me, many of the Democrats and the progressives who control City Hall and the union.
And that's where the size of the board comes in too. And if you look at one of the bills that's been pushed, I mean, it's 21 members. The deputy mayor said the mayor's office feels that's too big. The mayor feels that's too big.
And would they all be elected at large, not from a district? 21 at large?
Yeah, and 20, yeah. So, I mean, part of the idea behind that is to break it up into such small geographical areas where it's hard to pour a ton of money into one of 21 seats, right? But it does get a bit unwieldy when you're talking about essentially a mini city council running the school district. And so that's where the idea was from. But yeah, it can be a bit big.
And then isn't one of the strategies down there that the mayor is trying to deploy is to sort of put off the idea of a fully elected school board until after she is no longer in office, or at least until she gets reelected to another term, so that she's pushing to structure legislation so that it would be maybe hybrid for the time being, for a certain period of time, and then become fully elected. What are you hearing about that?
Yeah, so the bill that I believe you're talking about, even by the end of when it evolves into its final form, essentially, it still is not. It's still majority mayoral appointed members, and so it would start out with a little bit bigger board than is currently the 7-member board. I think there's 2 or 3 board members who would be elected. Vast majority, maybe 8, are appointed. And then each one would grow by 1 or 2, but in the end, it would still be majority mayoral appointed. And so to proponents of an elected school board, you're looking at that and saying, well, it's still mayoral control, right? We're still having the majority of the board in alignment with the mayor if she so chooses, or he, if there's a future mayor, because this could be after Mayor Lightfoot's out of office. But yeah, that's sort of where the difference of opinion is coming in. To people who want a fully elected board, it's just that. The point of it is to be able to elect the majority. It's a full democracy. It's not sort of this token democracy with a couple members who are still outweighed by the mayor.
Here's what I can't figure out. Why will education in Chicago get better if we have an elected school board? Why does it make, I understand, broadening democracy, but we have issues with schools. Everyone wants to make them better. Why having 21 people run the schools makes the schools system better?
Well, you sort of break it down, and again, this is what proponents of an elected school board say. You break it down to the people most directly involved with Chicago schooling are the ones that have a hand in the democracy. And so people vote for a mayor for all sorts of different issues, right? There are plenty of people in Chicago who don't have any stake in CPS other than, of course, their tax dollars, but they don't necessarily worry about the quality of the schools. And so you sort of break it down. The idea is to people who care about the schools, have an opportunity to run and have a bigger say in the school system.
And then you establish the levy that would be on them. Is that it? Would that how it would work, Nader?
Repeat the question, please.
They would the elected board members would be responsible for establishing.
Yes, right. Right. And yeah, and that's of course part of it. And so I mean, it's an open democracy. Anyone, even if you're right, you're a taxpayer who doesn't have kids in the system, you're still open to run. And so that's where some of the issues come in with parent representation, all that. I think some of these problems are a bit of a red herring, or they can be, because we'll get into that later. But some of these issues can be a red herring. At the end of the day, the idea for proponents of an elected school board is to get that democratic representation. People have more of a direct say. You never know how it works. I mean, you see how city council is right now. I think there are a lot of people who would say their representative isn't there in their own best interests. And so we'll see how it plays out.
So how would local school councils fit into even in, and forgive my ignorance on this, because I'm sure you know this and I don't, under the Lightfoot plan of a hybrid or the CTU pure elected school board, what happens to local school councils?
Yeah, so local school councils are still separate. They, for those who don't know, they essentially approve a budget, they hire a principal, they evaluate a principal, and that's essentially their role. They're made up of teachers, parents, community members, even one student. And so those would still be there. They are there to act as the very mini democracy of a single school. Now, there are also issues with local school councils. When they were first introduced 30 years ago, participation and voting was crazy high. There were so many people coming out, and it's waned over the years. And so there are now local school councils that don't have any power, or their school rating because of grades, attendance, what have you, their power has been stripped, and the school's on probation. They can't really do anything, the local school council. And so they'll still be there, but that's a whole nother issue that is likely needs some sorting out.
How would they interface? Would there be overlap in terms of responsibilities and power? And is there potential for some conflict there if we end up with this elected board and the school councils at the same time?
No, I don't think there's any conflict. The local school councils are pretty limited in what they control. Mm-hmm. If you ask some local school council members, they criticize the district and the city for not taking their input enough. And so I don't think there would be any conflict. You never know. Maybe an elected board listens to a local school council more than an appointed board does. But I mean, there's no telling. It could go either way.
What do you make of, and this, just because something is news to me does not mean it's news. You probably all know this. I found it interesting that the search firm that was hired to look for the new superintendent.
CEO.
I date myself when I say superintendent, that they're doing focus groups and surveys to, I guess, figure out what they want. What do you think they need to find out that they don't know and what they need? It would seem they need a clone of Jackson. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, and that's funny you mentioned. I mean, Janice Jackson was criticized during her time here and there, but you ask anyone and they would say what we want in a CPS CEO is a homegrown student, teacher, administrator, someone who's from Chicago, cares about the system, knows it intimately, cares about its improvement. She was the prototype, if we can put it that way. And so, yeah, from that sense, that's completely accurate. Maybe a clone. There are some of the criticism of Dr. Jackson was she cared deeply about equity and improving the district. Sometimes she wasn't bold enough. And you ask her, and I talked to her a few weeks ago, and she says, if I could fix hundreds of years of racism in 4 years, I'm Jesus Christ. And so she'll push back on that a little bit. But I think as far as the engagement, you really want to hear in this moment right now what parents want out of the district, out of a district leader, what students want, what teachers want. You need to understand their needs. And I mean, this is such a crossroads. It's not only you're looking for a new CEO, you're coming out of a pandemic, the worst in 100 years, and the needs of the district are very, very deep. And everything the district would have needed a year and a half ago those needs are accentuated and magnified now. And so you really need to find the right leader for the moment. It's a little tough, I would say, to come into this job right now, because one, you don't know if the mayor who hires you is going to be here in a couple of years. There's an election. Two, all of the reasons that Janice Jackson left and burned out of the position, they still exist. You still have to mend a relationship with the Chicago Teachers Union. You still have to deal with recovering from pandemic. You still have to deal with a mayor who, by some accounts, is demanding, and you have to work with her and be able to build a relationship with her. And so the challenges are still there. And I think that's why the search firm wants to listen, the mayor wants to listen to hear what people want and need, and they'll go from there. One interesting note to add, this is the same search firm who conducted a search recently for the second largest school district in Virginia, and the person that they landed on was LaTanya McDade, the second in charge of CPS, who's also leaving along with Janice Jackson. So
right, because she's just across the river from where I am. I noted that. So
are there any inside candidates? Some people in the system right now, as you suggested, it maybe we need someone who's homegrown, who's someone who's come through the system in one way or the other. Are there names that you're hearing out there?
It's a little tough to look internally right now, because, like I mentioned, LaTanya McDade is leaving. Just like Janice Jackson before her, she was the chief education officer and then moved up to CEO. LaTanya McDade would have been the natural replacement. She has that experience, has worked very closely with the CEO, knows the ins and outs of the job. For the same reasons that Dr. Jackson left, I think LaTanya McDade also, just knowing that this position might come open, it's telling that she was okay leaving. She didn't want to deal with the same issues either. And so she would have been the natural replacement. After that, you get into some less experienced administrators. I don't think there's going to be a principal who you would trust to go from running a school of 2,000 kids to the nation's third largest system at 350,000. And so if I had to put a bet on it right now, I'd say it'll be an outside candidate, but we'll see. The mayor's also mentioned there's people who used to work for CPS who have gone elsewhere and could come back. And so there's a wide range of candidates out there.
well, you know what, I have a takeaway, and again, everyone who's listening knows I'm in Washington, so I have a little bit of a literally distance on here. To listen to Sybil, Madison, to Stacy, Davis Gates, I'm listening to people that seem to agree more than they disagree in terms of educational philosophy, in terms of approach, in terms of progressive politics, in terms of deep commitment to equity. So if you didn't know that when they, that in the bigger arena, Chicago rough and tumble politics, that there's this going on, it is just kind of remarkable how there's this whoop instead of, how they go apart instead of together, when they're all slices off the same loaf of bread in terms of the political approach on this. And that's why I think you have one of the most fascinating beats of the paper, because you have the educational policy, how we learn, how we read, to just how do we govern schools. And it's hard. All of this is hard, and everything's harder because of COVID.
Sure. And speaking of COVID, I guess my last question, Nader, is what do you think is do you think it's possible schools are going to open fully in September? I know there's a lot of questions out there, but assuming that we don't have any major surprises with COVID, are they going to be ready in the fall? And are both CPS and CTU going to be ready to team up and make it happen?
Yeah, so barring any major spikes in COVID, anything new happening, the State Board of Education just this week adopted a resolution that it didn't itself mandate in-person learning, but it supported the state superintendent of education in an upcoming announcement she's going to make to mandate full-time in-person learning this fall. The only exceptions are going to be students who aren't eligible for the vaccine. So right now that's anyone under 12 and who are under a quarantine order by their local health department. And so for effectively, school is back this fall. And what's going to need to happen is by the state's order. That's how it's going to be. What needs to happen over the next few months is, like we've heard from Stacy Davis-Gates, from the deputy mayor, there's going to need to be some collaboration. There are a lot of families right now who don't trust the district. They still don't trust the district. They haven't gone back to school. The latest data that we have was about 22% of students in all grades were showing up in person. And there's another chunk, about 11%, who are completely absent, both in person and online. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done to re-engage these families, build that trust, get people vaccinated, and then get them back into school. So yeah, this summer is going to be a lot of work. And I would say, Lynn, we've seen the past little bit. It's possible for CPS and the CTU to collaborate. After all that happened the past few months, from December until schools reopened in March or April, they ended up with an agreement that was maybe one of the strongest in the country. And I think CPS, the mayor's office, the union would all acknowledge that. They are now collaborating to get students vaccinated. They have sites set up for students. They collaborated after some strong advocacy from the union to get teachers vaccinated. It's possible to collaborate. It's just going to take everyone sitting down and acknowledging we have the same end goals in mind. Let's just work together to get there.
Wow. Well,
I know you're going to be watching all of that, Nader. You're going to be keeping us posted as the summer goes on.
Right.
A lot to cover out there.
I appreciate that we were able to, we usually don't have just two guests in a show. And I think, we wanted to have a bit more of a discussion, and Nader, you added a lot to it. As we close out the show, I want to thank the Sun-Times educational reporter, Nader Issa. I want to thank City Hall Deputy Mayor Sybil Madison. I want to thank Stacy Davis-Gates, who is the Vice President of the Chicago Teachers Union. Now, I need to do a little sales job, because we need to sell everybody some subscriptions, because we need to make some money for the paper. And we know, and we thank everybody who is on the show. And we know some of you are subscribers, but if you're not, we want to let you know that we have a really great digital offering for all of you, wherever you are, especially, you hear me say this every show, the Sun-Times e-paper. I love it, read it every day. Special digital offer gives you unlimited access to both the e-paper, which has every story in the Sun-Times, it's a replica, plus you get access to every story online, and it's all for only $2.49 a month. You can learn more and subscribe now at suntimes.com/subscribe. So our next show in year 2 of At the Virtual Table is going to be next January 17. Until then, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Have a great evening. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Hold on.